Hello and welcome to Story Just Told. Today's story is one of courage, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of justice. We follow Ben, a man who made a promise to his father, wrongly convicted, that he would bring him home. This is a journey filled with corruption, danger, and emotional depth. So if you want to see how Ben takes on a corrupt system and uncovers the truth, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and let's dive into the story. A powerful opening. Imagine a gloomy day inside a courtroom. Dim light filters through a small window, casting shadows on the deeply wrinkled face of a middle-aged man. The father, his face worn with hardship, his eyes filled with despair, stands at the defendant's stand. Surrounding him are the cold, judgmental gazes of the judge, the prosecutor, and unfamiliar spectators. Then the fateful verdict echoes through the heavy air. We find the defendant guilty. The father does not plead for justice anymore. Every attempt has already fallen into nothingness. Instead, he turns around, his eyes searching for the familiar figure of his young son, sitting at the back of the courtroom, his eyes red, his trembling hands clenched into tight fists. In that moment, an unshakable vow is etched into the boy's heart. I will never give up. I will bring my father home. This is where the story begins, the arduous journey of a son, from an innocent child to a determined young man, fighting against all odds to reclaim justice for his father. But can the truth prevail in a legal system riddled with corruption? And can love and loyalty to family be strong enough to overcome a cruel fate? Stay until the end to witness this emotional journey, a tale of resilience, justice, and a hope that never fades. Setting the scene. The protagonist's family lives in a small town, a place that seems peaceful on the surface but hides many dark secrets. His father is a hard-working blacksmith, well known for his honesty and dedication. The neighbors admire him not just for his craftsmanship but also for his kindness, always willing to help others. His mother, gentle and nurturing, holds the family together, while their only son, Ben, is a bright, inquisitive boy who deeply admires his father. However, the town is not as serene as it appears. Behind the quiet streets lurks a justice system easily manipulated by power and wealth. Influential figures like businessman Langston and prosecutor Hayes hold enough authority to control both the police and the courts. Beneath the polished facade of justice, wrongful convictions unfold silently, leaving innocent families shattered. It is within this corrupt system that Ben's family is caught in a merciless legal storm. One day, his father is suddenly accused of a crime he had no involvement in. The evidence is flimsy, testimonies are fabricated by greedy individuals, and the judiciary's lack of transparency swiftly leads to his conviction. These events lay the foundation for Ben's painful journey in search of justice as he grows up. His battle is not just against corrupt officials and powerful figures, but also against the dangerous flaws of a legal system that many believe to be infallible. The key events and the conviction. Depicting the trial. The atmosphere in the courtroom was heavy, as if shrouded in an invisible mist. Curious and judgmental eyes from the spectators fixated on the middle-aged man standing silently at the defendant's stand. The father, his hair streaked with gray, his shoulders frail, appeared small in the vast yet cold courtroom. Opposite him stood prosecutor Hayes, a sharp-witted man with a terrifying reputation. He had never lost a case. The judge entered, striking his gavel forcefully, declaring the trial in session. Hayes swiftly seized the floor, delivering his fierce accusations. The defendant was present at the crime scene on the night of the incident. We have undeniable evidence proving that he is the perpetrator. He then presented what seemed like irrefutable proof to the jury: a blood-stained handkerchief found near the crime scene, and a witness who claimed to have seen the father's silhouette on that fateful night. Hayes concluded his case with a commanding tone. Justice demands rightful punishment. The defense attorney tried to counter the argument, pointing out that the handkerchief had no fingerprints of the defendant, and that the witness's testimony was full of inconsistencies, especially since the witness had a criminal record of providing false testimonies in the past. However, the judge, who seemed unsympathetic to the father, quickly dismissed these arguments. A key witness took the stand, a man with shifty eyes, unable to meet the gaze of the jury. Despite his attempts to remain calm, the tremor in his voice betrayed his uncertainty. I saw him walking down the road near the crime scene," the witness stammered. but he could not recall the exact time or any specific details. It was evident everything had been meticulously staged to frame the father. The jury, composed mostly of individuals with close ties to the town's powerful elite, showed little concern for the inconsistencies in the evidence. Behind the trial loomed the shadow of Langston, a wealthy businessman with deep-rooted connections. Langston had a personal interest in eliminating the father, a man who had once dared to stand against his illegal activities. With the backing of Prosecutor Hayes, Langston orchestrated the perfect script to ensure the father's downfall. The injustice in the legal system was evident not only in the manipulated evidence, but also in the conduct of those responsible for upholding justice. The judge, instead of maintaining impartiality, repeatedly interrupted the defense lawyer and displayed clear favoritism toward the prosecution. The jury, without thorough deliberation, quickly delivered a guilty verdict. This trial was more than just a legal battle, it exposed the psychological depths of each character. Prosecutor Hayes, driven by personal ambition and a relentless desire to maintain his flawless record, ignored all ethical considerations in pursuit of victory. Langston, the mastermind behind the scheme, exuded the arrogance of a man who believed money and power could buy anything, even justice. The father, on the other hand, remained composed despite his pain. He did not beg or attempt to defend himself. He knew that his words would fall on deaf ears. The only thing that betrayed his emotions was his gaze, filled with sorrow and a faint hope as he looked at his son sitting at the back of the courtroom. When the judge read the guilty verdict, the room fell into a suffocating silence. This verdict was not just the end of the trial, it was the shattering of a family's belief in justice. The father did not cry, but his eyes turned hollow and lifeless as though he had lost everything. Meanwhile, Ben, his son, clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Rage and despair surged within him. But beyond the pain, Ben knew he could not stand idly by. He had made a promise to his father. He would bring him home. From that moment on, it became the sole purpose of his existence. The trial had ended, but the fight for justice was just beginning. As Ben stepped out of the courthouse, the gray sky reflected his turmoil. But within him, a fire had been ignited, a fire of determination that nothing could extinguish. Ben's vow. The moment the verdict was announced, it was not just the people in the courtroom who felt the weight of it for Ben. It felt as if his entire world had collapsed. The boy who had once naively believed in justice, now faced the most excruciating pain of his life watching his father, the man he admired most, wrongfully convicted. At that moment, Ben's gaze reflected not just fear but paralysis, the helplessness of a child unable to save the person he loved most. A storm of emotions raged inside him, from despair to fury, from sorrow to burning anger. Then he made a vow. With his father's heartbroken eyes staring back at him, Ben whispered a promise, one that was not just spoken but carved into his soul. "I will bring you home, Father. I swear it." This was not just a child's impulsive words, it was an unbreakable oath. It was a commitment from which he could not retreat, no matter the trials that lay ahead. Ben was not just determined to free his father, he vowed to expose the truth. He would prove that justice was not dead, that love and family could withstand even the cruel absurdities of a corrupt system. This vow became the driving force behind the journey he was about to embark on. But it was not just blind determination. It was the result of everything he had endured and observed. Ben had grown up in a loving family, where his father was a role model, a man who believed that fairness and kindness could solve any problem. But now, that very system his father had trusted had betrayed him. Ben felt that betrayal in every breath he took. He was like a violin string pulled too tight, ready to snap at any moment. The battle within Ben. At that moment, Ben felt more than just loss. He felt the injustice that had crushed his father. His father was a good man, an honest man, a hard-working man. But the justice system, the very system meant to protect the innocent, had broken him. Ben could not comprehend why his father had to suffer this way, and that realization weighed heavily on him. The helplessness of being unable to change the verdict boiled into anger. His fury was not just directed at the people who had done this. It was also aimed at the society he had once trusted but now saw in its darkest form. Yet, Ben could not afford to be reckless. He was the son of a man who had been unjustly imprisoned, and his duty was to stay strong and fight for his father's freedom. This promise became his guiding flame. Even though the road ahead was long and full of obstacles, Ben realized he could not let anger consume him. Instead, he would use it as fuel to uncover the truth. Ben was not just angry, he was terrified. Terrified that the truth might never be revealed, that he might never be strong enough to fulfill his promise. But more than anything, he feared disappointing his father. His father had always taught him about integrity and perseverance. How could he let his father down now? Ben's fear intertwined with his resolve, and he realized something powerful. This was no longer just about freeing his father. This was a fight for justice itself. It was not just a battle between father and son against the system. It was a battle within Ben himself against fear, against doubt, against the crushing weight of injustice. Ben was no longer a naive boy. He had learned the painful truth of the world. And if no one else would stand for justice, then he would. Because he had made a promise. And he would not stop until he kept it. The search for truth. Ben's growth and discovery of the truth. Ben grew up in the shadow of pain and injustice, but these very hardships forged him into a resilient and determined individual, committed to restoring justice for his wrongly convicted father. After witnessing the fateful trial where his father was unjustly sentenced, Ben silently recorded every detail, every broken promise. These memories never faded. Instead, they became the driving force behind his pursuit of legal studies and justice. Over the years, Ben not only overcame the pain of loss, but also dedicated himself to becoming a skilled lawyer. His education was far from easy, sleepless nights buried in legal books. Relentless research into cases and legal precedents all helped him unravel the structure of the judicial system, a system he had once only known through the scars it left on his family. The law school where Ben studied was more than just an institution. It was a gateway to a vast and intricate world of legal theories, refining his sharp analytical mind and logical reasoning. Upon graduating, Ben quickly secured a position at a prestigious law firm. It was a major turning point, the beginning of his legal career, where he gained practical experience through real cases. Yet, deep in his heart, the memories of his father's trial and his unfulfilled promise burned brighter than ever. Despite his busy schedule, he continued to investigate his father's case, meticulously reviewing old files, collecting pieces of evidence that had long been overlooked, treating them as precious keys to unlock the long-buried truth. Not long into his career, Ben stumbled upon old legal documents related to his father's case. As he dug deeper, he uncovered inconsistencies in witness statements and contradictions in physical evidence. For instance, the blood-stained handkerchief, presented as a crucial piece of evidence, lacked his father's fingerprints. Additionally, the key witness had a history of fraud, making their testimony highly questionable. Ben began cross-referencing information from multiple sources. He reached out to journalists, legal experts, and insiders within the judicial system, gathering additional data and testimonies. Piece by piece, a disturbing picture of legal corruption and manipulation emerged. The hidden connections between powerful figures, businessman Langston, prosecutor Hayes, and certain police officials became evident. These individuals, motivated by self-interest, had meticulously orchestrated a case to frame Ben's father. Ben's pursuit of the truth went beyond mere research and document analysis. It led him into clandestine meetings, shadowy conversations, and covert encounters with those who had direct knowledge of the case. A former friend who once worked in criminal investigations confided in Ben, revealing that certain key evidence had been deliberately suppressed, and some witnesses had been threatened into silence. Each story Ben uncovered became another piece of the puzzle, painting an ever clearer picture of a deeply flawed and corrupt system. Alongside evidence collection, Ben analyzed every detail with logical precision. He compared case records, scrutinized forensic procedures, and exposed discrepancies in witness testimonies. Through his sharpened legal mind, Ben realized that his father's wrongful conviction was not just a failure of the system, it was the result of deliberate corruption, lack of transparency, and personal greed. This realization strengthened Ben's resolve. He began drafting detailed reports, outlining the trial's flaws and irregularities, backed by incontrovertible evidence of legal interference. Day after day, Ben met with experts, former court officials, and individuals directly connected to the case. These discussions, often dangerous and fraught with risks, became his greatest source of motivation. Through it all, one question haunted him. How could a system designed to uphold justice become a tool of injustice? This question shattered every excuse that justified corruption, intensifying the internal battle between Ben's logic and emotions. On the surface, he remained a composed and cautious lawyer, but beneath, his anger and determination to clear his father's name raged like an unstoppable fire. Many nights as he sat alone in his dimly lit office, his fingers tapping away at the keyboard, Ben would ask himself, "Am I on the right path?" But then the image of his father would resurface, the kind, weary eyes filled with both pain and hope. That was all Ben needed. The feeling of loss and injustice was no longer just personal, it was a reminder of a greater mission. To expose the truth, even if it required personal sacrifice. As Ben's investigation progressed, the final pieces of the puzzle fell into place. He uncovered illegal connections among powerful figures, traces of tampered evidence, and forged testimonies. Financial records, secret meetings, and recovered phone calls from old devices revealed the true reason behind his father's wrongful conviction. Corruption and abuse of power, once hidden behind the polished facade of the legal system, now stood exposed under the blinding light of truth. Ben's journey for justice was no longer just his own, it was a fight for everyone who had ever been wronged. His discoveries forced society to reconsider its blind faith in the legal system, a system that, despite its grand appearance, was riddled with deep-rooted flaws that needed urgent reform. And with each recovered piece of evidence, each witness willing to speak out, Ben's determination only grew stronger. He would not stop. Not until the truth was undeniable. Criminal psychology, the minds of Langston and Hayes. Within the backdrop of his father's wrongful conviction, the criminal psychology of figures like Langston and Hayes was more than just personal ambition, it was a testament to how power can corrupt an entire judicial system. Their behaviors and motives revealed how individuals like them maintained control through manipulation and deception, while also exposing critical flaws in the legal system. Langston, a wealthy businessman, represented those who use financial power to manipulate legal proceedings. To Langston, money was not just a tool for wealth, it was a weapon, a means to control legal outcomes and dictate the fate of others. His motives stemmed from boundless greed and an insatiable thirst for absolute power. He invested in political connections, funded election campaigns, and bribed witnesses, all to ensure that his version of reality remained untouchable. His actions lacked morality or compassion, he eliminated threats mercilessly, ensuring that anyone who dared challenge his authority was silenced. As Ben's investigation unraveled Langston's hidden influence, it became evident that he had woven a tight web of corruption, one that ensured any damaging evidence against him was erased before it could surface. To Langston, corruption was not a crime, it was a necessity for maintaining his empire. His cold, calculated methods proved a brutal truth. Justice was meaningless to those who could afford to rewrite the rules. Similarly, Prosecutor Hayes, a man who once stood as a symbol of law and order, had long abandoned his moral compass. Driven by narcissism and an unshakable belief in his own righteousness, Hayes had transformed into an enforcer of deception rather than truth. His overconfidence blinded him, leading him to believe that every decision he made was justifiable, even if it meant manipulating evidence and silencing witnesses. Together, Langston and Hayes formed a dangerous duo, blending financial dominance with judicial influence to blur the lines between right and wrong. Their secrets were well guarded, their crimes carefully buried beneath layers of legal protections. But what they didn't anticipate was someone like Ben. Someone who wouldn't stop until every hidden truth was exposed. And this time they were running out of places to hide. The relentless struggle. Rising tension. In the days following Ben's deep dive into the investigation, an invisible weight pressed upon his every move. Each time he stepped outside his office or picked up his phone, he felt unseen eyes trailing him, as if someone was monitoring his every step. One evening, as Ben was meticulously sorting through old case files and evidence related to his father's wrongful conviction, his phone vibrated, a call from an unknown number. His heartbeat quickened. A cold, menacing voice crackled through the speaker. "If you keep digging, the consequences will be severe." The warning struck like needles piercing his soul. Yet instead of intimidation, it ignited an even stronger fire within him. He knew the closer he got to the truth, the more powerful forces would try to silence him. Before he could fully process the threat, Another event shook his world. On a rainy afternoon as Ben was leaving his office, a black SUV roared from behind, tires screeching against the wet pavement. The deafening sound of a crashing impact, the shattering of glass, and the sheer force of the collision sent shockwaves down the street. Ben felt the ruthless power behind the attack. It was not a random robbery or act of vandalism. This was a warning, a brutal message telling him to stay out of it. Though his physical injuries were minor, the scars on his soul ran deep, etching a chilling reminder that those behind the conspiracy would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. But the threats didn't stop there. A devastating blow to his investigation came when Gerald Monroe, one of his key witnesses, vanished without a trace. Gerald had been an essential source, someone who had provided critical insights into the internal corruption of the legal system. They had scheduled a final meeting at a small cafe on the outskirts of town, where Gerald had promised to share new, damning evidence. But when Ben arrived, the cafe was empty. No sign of Gerald. Calls to his number rang unanswered, then disconnected altogether. Text messages were met with automated error replies, as if his existence had been erased overnight. Gerald's disappearance was not just a missing puzzle piece, it was a stark warning that Ben was treading on forbidden ground. Every time he replayed Gerald's anxious expression from their last conversation, the message became clearer. Be careful, you're entering a dangerous territory. The case was no longer just a legal battle, it had become a war against unseen forces. Ben could no longer ignore the shadow of manipulation, violence, and conspiracy looming over him. Every time he heard a car honking late at night, he wondered if it was another warning. Every time he felt a chill run down his spine, he knew that his every step was being tracked. Every time he glanced over his shoulder, he half expected another attack, another disappearance, another attempt to silence him. But fear was no longer an option. Instead of backing down, Ben steeled himself. He knew the only way forward was to keep pushing, to uncover even deeper secrets, to build an impenetrable shield of evidence before his enemies could destroy it all. His father's case was no longer just a personal fight. This was now a war between light and darkness, between truth and corruption. The black SUV's attack, the anonymous threats, and Gerald's sudden disappearance were all strategic moves orchestrated to test Ben's resolve, to break him before he could reach the truth. But instead of fear, they fueled his determination. Every attempt to silence him only made him stronger. Every warning only deepened his resolve. Every danger he faced forged him into an unbreakable force. And as the stakes climbed higher, Ben prepared for the ultimate confrontation where he would no longer be the hunted, but the hunter. Creating suspense. Under the dim glow of twilight, the air around felt heavy with unspoken words and lingering threats. Ben stepped into a small, secluded room on the outskirts of town, a place where his adversaries gathered to conspire. The room was dark, illuminated only by flickering neon lights, casting eerie reflections on the faces of those present. Tension filled the air, thick with the weight of concealed schemes and hushed conversations. This was the moment of reckoning. Here Ben would confront the very men who had orchestrated everything to obstruct his investigation. As the door creaked open, Ben entered with steady steps, his expression a mix of confidence and sharp vigilance. Across from him stood Langston, the wealthy businessman, with a sly smirk, alongside Prosecutor Hayes, exuding his usual cold arrogance. Both men, masters of deception, held their carefully crafted strategies close to their chests. But now they faced a different kind of challenge. Ben, unwavering in his resolve, standing before them in the heart of their secret meeting. Langston was the first to speak, his voice low and laced with mockery. Ben, stepping into this room is a bold move. Do you really believe a few sheets of paper and some words can change everything? Ben didn't answer immediately. Instead, he locked eyes with Langston, his gaze burning with determination and defiance. After a tense silence, he finally spoke. Langston, you think your power is eternal, but you forget truth always finds its way to the surface. I didn't come here to negotiate or compromise. I came to seek justice for my father, and for all those who have suffered under the corruption of this system. Hayes, the man who had long twisted justice to his own advantage, let out a scoff. How noble! But truth, Ben, is not shaped by ideals, it is dictated by power. And in this world, power is everything. You're nothing but a fleeting whisper in the grand symphony of control. The atmosphere turned heavier, words cutting like blades, each syllable escalating the confrontation. Ben took a step closer to Hayes, his voice unwavering. Hayes, do you know that every word you speak is coated with deceit? You're overconfident. But one day, every lie you've built will crumble. Langston, unfazed, raised his wine glass, his eyes sharp as daggers. Threats and promises mean nothing in the face of reality. You're just a boy clinging to illusions of justice. Money and power rule this world. Ben opened his arms slightly, as if to diffuse the tension, but instead, he commanded attention. Money and power may deceive the world for a while, but they can't bury the truth forever. Langston, Hayes, your actions have left consequences you can't erase. And today, I stand here not just for myself, but for every person your system has betrayed. His words pierced through the room like an arrow, rendering everyone momentarily silent. Langston's smirk faltered. Hayes' icy gaze narrowed, his demeanor no longer as unshakable. Then a sudden ring pierced the silence. Hayes pulled his phone from his pocket, the dim neon light reflecting off the screen. A single message flashed before his eyes. Stop interfering or face severe consequences. Hayes lowered the phone, his grip tightening, though he masked his unease with a scoff. Idle threats meant to distract you. Do you truly think you can stand against this storm, Ben? Ben's reply was calm, yet undeniably resolute. I've endured battles you can't begin to imagine. The wounds of my father, the scars of injustice, you won't erase them. And I will never fear men without hearts. Langston chuckled, stepping forward, closing the space between them. Then prove it, Ben. Show us this so-called evidence you believe will shatter the fortress we've built around this system. Without hesitation, Ben reached inside his coat, pulling out a thick envelope, documents, reports, photographs, all meticulously gathered. He flipped the envelope open, and papers scattered into the air, fluttering down like shattered fragments of hidden truths. Here's the proof, Ben declared, his voice ringing with undeniable force. Proof that wrongful convictions, corrupt interventions, and manipulations of justice aren't just my father's story, they are the stories of thousands. Every signature, every falsified report, they all tell the truth you tried to bury. Hayes' confidence wavered as he skimmed through the documents. His hands gripped the pages tighter, his posture stiff with tension. Trying to regain control, he muttered. Documents can be fabricated. A few scattered papers won't bring down an entire system. We hold the connections, the power. This empire does not fall so easily. Ben stepped closer, his unwavering eyes piercing through Hayes' false bravado. Hayes, perhaps you've forgotten even the smallest piece of paper can complete the bigger picture of truth. I'm not stopping here. I will uncover every secret, expose every lie until the truth is undeniable. A sharp laugh erupted from Langston, echoing like thunder in the tense room. How amusing. You chase ghosts, Ben. You think truth will save you? You are nothing more than a tiny cog in a machine too vast to dismantle. And when it crushes you, no one will remember you ever existed. His words rumbled like a storm, but Ben did not flinch. He turned to Langston, his voice calm yet burning with conviction. Langston, you can control people, bury evidence, and weave lies, but you cannot control the hearts of those who seek justice. I don't fear you. But you? You should fear what you've become. And today, I will show you truth always prevails. Then a noise shattered the moment. A faint sound outside the window, perhaps just the wind stirring the trees. Yet, in that moment, it felt like an omen of the storm to come. Hayes glanced at his phone again, tension creasing his face. Ben seized the moment, his voice cutting through the thick air. Hayes, you may twist the system, but you cannot silence those who have suffered. Every threat you make, every move you take, it only makes the truth more visible. Langston's cold stare didn't waver, but his voice dipped into mocking amusement. Brave words from a young idealist. But you're playing a dangerous game, Ben. One wrong step and you and your loved ones will pay the price. When the storm comes, there will be nowhere left for you to hide. A deadly stillness settled in the room. Ben stood firm, his gaze unwavering, his resolve unshaken by threats. I didn't come here to seek safety, he declared. I came here to seek justice. If this is your game, then I will be the one to change the rules. Just then a knock echoed through the silence. The door creaked open, revealing a man, his face lined with worry but brimming with determination. One of the witnesses Ben had been searching for. I have information you need. But we must act fast, they are trying to stop me. Ben met his gaze, sensing the urgency in his voice. Turning back to Langston and Hayes, he smirked slightly. Shall we hear the real truth, gentlemen? The air grew thick with suspense, a battle of ideals colliding with corruption. For the first time, Langston and Hayes were at a loss for words. And Ben? He had never been more ready to fight. Psychological analysis of Ben. Throughout his journey to uncover the truth and clear his father's name, Ben underwent a profound psychological transformation, one that intertwined deep emotional wounds with an unshakable belief in justice. Ben's psyche not only reflected the coming-of-age story of a son shaped by loss and injustice, but also served as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, capable of withstanding relentless challenges, lurking dangers, and the ultimate betrayal of those around him. The early emotional turmoil. From the very first moment he witnessed his father's wrongful conviction, Ben experienced an earth-shattering psychological shock. His initial reaction was a mixture of helplessness, fear, and an overwhelming sense of injustice. In that moment, he lost not only his trust in the legal system, but also a part of himself, forever haunted by the image of his father, a gentle, hard-working man being pushed into the abyss of wrongful condemnation. This powerless rage slowly transformed into unwavering determination, igniting within him a promise that he would never let the truth remain buried. At first, this promise was nothing more than a flickering flame, fragile yet persistent. But as the years passed, it grew into an inferno, unstoppable, unyielding. The internal and external struggles of the investigation. Ben's search for justice was not just about collecting evidence. It was a battle on two fronts: external threats and internal demons. With every step he took into the depths of the case, he walked further into danger. He was being watched. He was being warned. He was being hunted. Threatening phone calls, sudden attacks, and the mysterious disappearance of key witnesses like Gerald Monroe placed him under immense psychological pressure. But instead of allowing fear to consume him, Ben learned to turn fear into fuel. These threats were not mere warnings, they were proof that he was on the right path. And if the truth was buried this deeply, it meant only those who dared to face the fire could bring it to light. Yet, the burden of the investigation was excruciating. Sleepless nights hunched over files, abandoning personal joys, and sacrificing every ounce of normalcy in pursuit of justice left scars not only on his body but on his soul. The loneliness was suffocating. There were times when he felt like he was drowning, trapped in a maze of contradictions, blocked by powerful forces determined to erase the truth. But in those moments of weakness, he always returned to the vow he made to his father. This wasn't just a promise anymore, it was a declaration of love, loyalty, and an undying belief in justice. The influence of family and the weight of responsibility. Ben's journey was not just about his father's wrongful conviction. It tore through his entire family, leaving scars that could never fully heal. The betrayal of the legal system was not just an institutional failure. It was a personal wound that fractured his family's sense of hope and unity. For years, Ben wrestled with guilt, the guilt of watching his mother, his siblings, and himself suffer under the weight of injustice, unable to change the past. But instead of breaking him, this pain became his greatest motivation. He realized that this fight was not just for his father, it was for every innocent person crushed under the corrupt system. It was for his mother, whose tears had long dried from exhaustion. It was for his siblings, who grew up in the shadow of injustice. It was for every person who had been silenced. If he could restore justice, then maybe, just maybe, he could heal the wounds left behind. The growth of Ben's psychological strength. Ben's transformation was not merely about gaining knowledge and legal expertise, it was about forging an iron will in the face of unrelenting adversity. He learned how to remain composed under pressure, how to analyze evidence with sharp logic, and most importantly, how to face his enemies without fear. Each death threat, each act of deception from those in power, only hardened his resolve. He came to a revelation. Those in power could control the courts, they could control the law, they could control people's fears. But there was one thing they could never control: the soul of a man who refuses to bow before corruption. At the same time, Ben struggled to balance his mission with his responsibility to his family. Each time he recalled his father's suffering, each time he heard his mother's quiet resilience, each time he saw the sacrifices his family made, the weight of his purpose became heavier. He had sacrificed so much. Precious time with loved ones, moments of peace, even his own safety. But he knew one truth. Justice was worth every sacrifice. And if he had to endure pain to clear his father's name, then he would embrace the pain with open arms. The psychological evolution of a warrior for justice. Ben's journey reshaped his entire understanding of justice. Once he was a naive boy, believing in the righteousness of the legal system. But as he unraveled the web of corruption, as he suffered betrayals and disillusionment, he shed his innocence and embraced wisdom. He realized justice was not merely a set of laws. Justice was a battle that required courage, resilience, and sacrifice. The laws could be manipulated. The courts could be controlled. But the human spirit? That was untouchable. And so, Ben became more than just a lawyer. He became a warrior for the truth. He faced nights of doubt, wondering if his sacrifices would ever matter, questioning if he was fighting a losing battle. But with each challenge, Ben came to accept a harsh but liberating reality. Scars make a man stronger. It was his pain, his imperfections, his wounds that forged his unbreakable spirit. And if he truly wanted to change the world, he had to be willing to endure every hardship thrown at him. A never-ending source of strength. Ben's psychological journey was not just about seeking truth. It was about becoming the embodiment of justice itself. Every loss, every sacrifice, every betrayal was not a burden but a source of power. Through tears, sleepless nights, and mortal danger, Ben created a new foundation for himself. One where truth reigned above all else. He became sharper, wiser, and more fearless. He understood the price of freedom. He understood the weight of loyalty. And he knew without a doubt that even in the darkest of times, even when the world seemed consumed by corruption, there would always be a light, the light of courage, of truth, and of an unyielding spirit. And Ben? He would carry that light until the very end, uncovering the truth and seeking justice, discovering the crucial evidence. Throughout his long and arduous investigation, Ben tirelessly sought every piece of the puzzle, and at last, the decisive evidence was revealed, evidence that would expose the dark conspiracies behind his father's wrongful conviction. One of the most critical breakthroughs came when Ben discovered an old accounting ledger, a tangible record containing suspicious transactions that had been hidden away in the archives of a company linked to illicit dealings. This ledger was not just a collection of financial records, it was the key that unlocked a vast web of corruption and secret alliances among powerful figures. The search for the ledger. Ben's pursuit of the hidden ledger began with an indirect lead from a whistleblower, a former accounting employee, who discreetly sent him a few copied pages. These pages revealed inexplicable cash transfers and financial discrepancies that did not match the official records. At first glance, these irregularities seemed like minor errors, but Ben, with his sharp investigative instincts, recognized them for what they truly were: deliberate cover-ups hiding bribery payments and court manipulations. Through relentless fact-checking, cross-referencing with multiple sources, and painstaking analysis, Ben ultimately tracked down the original ledger, an undeniable testament to the illegal financial dealings that orchestrated his father's downfall. The secret audio recordings. Alongside the accounting evidence, Ben stumbled upon another vital discovery: audio recordings that would serve as incriminating proof of high-level collusion. While searching through an abandoned digital archive, he found an old hard drive once belonging to a former employee of the corrupt corporation. Within it, he uncovered recorded conversations from private meetings where officials and business elites discussed how to manipulate legal proceedings. They spoke of adjusting evidence, coaching witnesses, and transferring hush money to ensure the trial's outcome was predetermined. Each audio clip was like a missing puzzle piece, slowly painting a comprehensive picture of how the legal system had been twisted to serve the interests of the powerful. Ben meticulously extracted, analyzed, and cross-referenced these recordings with the financial reports and other documents. Unveiling the conspiracy. These conversations revealed the brutal tactics used by influential figures like District Attorney Hayes and business magnate Langston. Threats and coercion against witnesses, bribery to ensure their silence, slander campaigns to destroy the credibility of those seeking justice. These weren't just abstract discussions, they were chilling confessions of how deeply corruption had infiltrated the judicial system. And when played in court, These recordings would serve as undeniable proof that the justice system had been compromised by a meticulously orchestrated deception. The final breakthrough. Richard Callahan's testimony. The final, crucial turning point came with the unexpected confession of Richard Callahan, a man deeply entangled in the financial fraud that led to Ben's father's wrongful conviction. For years, Callahan had remained a mystery, a figure hidden in the shadows of corruption. But after persistent pressure from Ben, and under the watchful eyes of trusted witnesses, he finally broke his silence. During a secret meeting, Ben laid out the overwhelming evidence, giving Callahan the confidence to come forward. His voice trembled, but his words were resolute. He exposed how the accounting ledger's irregular transactions were used to fund illegal activities, how meetings and recorded calls had been crucial in engineering the trial's outcome, how Langston and Hayes had built a covert financial network to silence the truth and control the verdict. The weight of the evidence, the combined power of the accounting ledger, the audio recordings, and Callahan's testimony formed an unbreakable chain of proof. Each piece of evidence was like a mirror reflecting the long-hidden truth, once concealed beneath layers of wealth and influence. The ledger provided irrefutable numerical evidence of illicit transactions. The recordings offered first-hand insight into the cold-blooded strategies of those who orchestrated the deception. Callahan's confession served as the final nail in the coffin, connecting every fragmented clue into an undeniable damning case. Unleashing a shockwave. When this evidence was presented to the public, it sent shockwaves through the legal community. The case was no longer just about Ben's father. It exposed a grand scheme, a deep-rooted corruption scandal that had infiltrated the very foundations of justice. For too long, the system had been manipulated, but now, with the truth revealed, there was no place left for the guilty to hide. A reckoning in the retrial. With this irrefutable evidence, the retrial became a battlefield of justice. The defendants, once protected by influence and wealth, found themselves trapped under the inescapable weight of truth. Each document, each recording, each testimony tore apart their defense, leaving them with no ground to stand on. The once untouchable figures now face public disgrace, legal consequences, and the crumbling of their empire. Restoring faith in justice for the legal world. This wasn't just about correcting one wrongful conviction. It was a turning point, forcing a reckoning on the flaws and corruption within the system. Judicial reforms were called for, oversight mechanisms were demanded, and the public's trust in the system began to heal. Ben's fight was no longer just about his father's freedom, but about restoring faith in justice itself. A victory beyond the courtroom. Through the pain, the struggles, and the sacrifices, Ben had done more than just uncover a conspiracy. He had proven that truth, when relentlessly pursued, could break even the most impenetrable walls of deception. His father's name was cleared, but his legacy was far greater. A legal system that could no longer turn a blind eye. A society that now knew the truth, and a new hope for justice to prevail. The fight had been long and merciless, but in the end justice had spoken. The truth had prevailed, and the guilty at last were held accountable. The psychology of criminal minds. In a legal system that was meant to uphold justice, figures like Langston, Hayes, and Carter delved into criminal behavior with sophisticated precision, driven by the false belief that they could manipulate and conceal their crimes forever. The psychology of these criminals was a complex mix of greed, arrogance, and fear of losing power, leading them down a path of deception and critical miscalculations. Langston, the arrogant tycoon. Langston, a wealthy and powerful businessman, was the embodiment of a man who believed money could buy everything: justice, truth, and even morality. His primary motivation was his insatiable greed, constantly seeking ways to increase profits and expand his influence. Langston firmly believed that as long as he had enough wealth, he could control any legal proceeding, from bribing witnesses to manipulating court rulings. His arrogance stemmed from the vast network he had built among powerful officials. However, this overconfidence became his greatest weakness. Langston underestimated people like Ben, those willing to stand against corruption. He believed his actions were beyond the reach of justice, never considering that evidence would one day surface. His complacency allowed key pieces of proof to slip through his fingers, from the accounting ledger to the incriminating recordings that would ultimately expose his crimes. Hayes, the corrupt prosecutor. On the surface, District Attorney Hayes presented himself as a champion of justice, but beneath the facade, he was driven by arrogance and ruthless ambition. Hayes saw himself as the ultimate authority on right and wrong, believing that only he had the power to shape justice. His pride and ego, tainted by corruption, led him to manipulate court cases without hesitation. Hayes was not motivated solely by career success. He craved power and influence, desiring to cement his legacy as an untouchable legal force. He justified his unethical actions by convincing himself that he was creating a fair system where justice served his interests and those of his allies. However, his arrogance blinded him. He failed to see the warning signs, the loose ends in his operation, the growing suspicion around him, and the evidence slowly coming together. His biggest mistake was underestimating the power of truth. Despite his careful planning, he couldn't prevent leaks, and the very recordings and documents he thought were secure became the instruments of his downfall. Carter, the mastermind in the shadows. Carter, though less publicly known compared to Langston and Hayes, was just as dangerous. As the logistics manager and coordinator of illicit transactions, he was regarded as the brain behind the criminal operations. Carter's motivation stemmed from his obsession with control. He thrived on managing information, creating an environment of secrecy where suspicion was eliminated before it could even arise. Using advanced encryption, secure communication channels, and a tight-knit network, Carter ensured that no trace of their crimes could be detected easily. However, he made a critical mistake overestimating the invincibility of technology. He failed to anticipate the resilience of those who would challenge his system. In the end, his blind faith in digital security led to his downfall, as sensitive data was leaked through unexpected channels. What he thought was an impenetrable wall turned out to be a fortress with cracks, allowing investigators like Ben to break through and expose the truth. The fear of losing power. Despite their outward confidence, Langston, Hayes, and Carter were ultimately driven by fear, the fear of losing everything they had built. In their world, power was not just a tool but a currency that determined their survival. They believed that as long as they controlled the system, they were untouchable. But as the truth began to surface, this fear of exposure began to consume them. They doubled down on intimidation, increased their use of threats, resorted to desperate tactics to maintain their illusion of control. Yet, these actions only accelerated their downfall. Every attempt to silence those who pursued justice became another thread unraveled, bringing them closer to their inevitable reckoning. The illusion of permanent control. One of their greatest miscalculations was the delusion that they could manipulate the system indefinitely. They assumed that with money, power, and secret alliances, they were immune to consequences. But their complacency blinded them to a simple truth: no system, no matter how corrupt, can suppress the truth forever. When faced with relentless investigators like Ben, they refused to adapt. Instead of course-correcting, they chose to bury the truth deeper, unaware that each cover-up only made their downfall more inevitable. Cracks in their alliance. As the pressure mounted, Langston, Hayes, and Carter began to turn on each other. Despite sharing a common goal, they competed for dominance, each seeking to secure their own position. Their internal conflicts created gaps in their defenses, weaknesses that Ben and his allies could exploit. What had once been a united front crumbled under the weight of paranoia and betrayal. This infighting was the final proof that even the most powerful criminal networks were ultimately vulnerable to the consequences of their own corruption. The price of their mistakes. In the end, the psychology of Langston, Hayes, and Carter was built on three pillars of self-destruction. Greed, their hunger for power, led them to believe they were above the law. Arrogance, they ignored the warning signs, convinced that no one could challenge them. Fear, as the truth closed in, their paranoia and recklessness only accelerated their downfall. Their biggest mistake was underestimating the resilience of truth. They failed to see that no matter how carefully they schemed, there would always be those willing to fight for justice. In the end, it was not just Ben's persistence that defeated them, but their own inability to recognize the power of honesty, resilience, and courage. Their downfall was a reminder that no matter how deeply corruption runs, truth will always find a way to emerge. The final battle. After years of tension and relentless struggle, the final retrial had arrived, the culmination of Ben's arduous fight for justice. This was not just a trial to exonerate his wrongfully convicted father but a battle against an entire corrupt legal system, where truth, no matter how long it had been buried, would finally be brought to light. The courtroom. A stage for justice. The retrial took place in a grand courtroom, where sunlight streamed through the large windows, as if piercing through the darkness of the past. The audience, composed of citizens who had lost faith in the system, along with journalists and legal experts, gathered to witness history unfold. Ben, now a brilliant attorney, stood outside the courtroom podium with unwavering determination. Inside him was not only the pride of uncovering the truth, but also the heavy burden of responsibility for all those who had suffered from injustice. His father, after enduring years of wrongful imprisonment and unimaginable pain, was finally there as a free man, his eyes filled with newfound hope. The presentation of undeniable evidence. As the trial progressed, faces that once symbolized injustice and deception began to shift as the truth unraveled before their eyes. One by one, the decisive pieces of evidence, the accounting ledger, the secret recordings, and Richard Callahan's confession were presented before the jury. These were not just documents, they were proof of the sinister manipulation conducted by Langston, Hayes, and Carter. They did not just expose individual corruption, they revealed the collapse of an entire system that was supposed to serve justice, but had been weaponized to oppress the innocent. Ben's relentless argument. With logical precision, Ben methodically laid out the details of the case. He demonstrated how the old accounting ledger exposed mysterious fund transfers that were used to bribe witnesses. He played the audio recordings, proving that the trial had been orchestrated to bury the truth. He presented Richard Callahan's chilling confession, revealing the inner workings of a criminal network that had controlled legal proceedings from behind the scenes. Each piece of evidence was a blade, shredding through the facade of fairness that the prosecution had once fabricated. A courtroom under pressure. Every question Ben asked struck like a hammer, forcing the corrupt figures to squirm under the weight of their own lies. The tension in the courtroom was palpable. Every word, every glance carried the weight of justice battling deception. The jury members, initially hesitant and conflicted, began to see the cracks in the system they had once blindly trusted. They recognized the truth that the legal system they upheld had been compromised. Now they had a chance to correct its failures. The climactic showdown. The final confrontation between Ben and the forces of corruption reached its boiling point. Standing firm, Ben declared with unwavering resolve, "The truth cannot be hidden forever. Every document, every recording, every confession is living proof of the corruption that poisoned this system. Justice demands not only punishment for the guilty, but also the restoration of a legal system that serves fairness and transparency for all." His words pierced through the courtroom, like a beacon of light tearing through the fog of deceit. The verdict. A defining moment. As the final decision neared, the courtroom fell into a breathless silence. The jury, after reviewing the overwhelming evidence, had no room for doubt or manipulation. Then the moment arrived. The previous conviction was a grievous miscarriage of justice. "The accused is hereby exonerated." The words echoed through the courtroom, and in that instant tears streamed down the faces of those who had endured years of injustice. These were tears of relief, redemption, and victory, a testament that after all the suffering, justice had finally prevailed. A system transformed. The legal system, once regarded as a symbol of fairness, now faced the weight of its own corruption. The trial's aftermath led to independent investigations into high-ranking officials, sweeping legal reforms to prevent future manipulation, increased accountability within judicial bodies. This was not just about correcting a single case, it ignited a movement demanding a transparent and fair justice system. Legal experts hailed this trial as a turning point, proving that even in a flawed system, the truth could rise. When courage and persistence refused to be silenced, Ben, the symbol of justice, Ben, now more than just a skilled lawyer, had become a beacon of hope and integrity. He had not only cleared his father's name, but had also played a crucial role in reshaping a corrupt system. His victory inspired countless others, reminding the world that no matter how formidable the enemy, truth will always find its way to the surface. The final battle, a testament to resilience. This was not just the triumph of a son avenging his father. This was justice conquering corruption. With every piece of evidence, Ben had rebuilt a shattered narrative, one that the system had tried to erase. Through persistence and righteousness, he had forced a system built on lies to confront its own failures. As the truth stood in the light, the legal system began its long-overdue transformation. A new era of justice. With this trial, the shadows of the past were dispelled, opening a future where justice was not just an ideal, but a reality worth fighting for. The legal reforms that followed served as a powerful reminder: no matter how deep corruption runs, the truth will never remain buried forever. And every citizen, no matter how powerless they may seem, has the right to live in a world of fairness and transparency. The conclusion: the family reunion. After 15 long years of separation, the moment of reunion felt like a quiet miracle, dissolving old wounds and rekindling hope for a brighter future. On a crisp evening, as the golden hues of the sunset bathed the sky, Ben's family, after years of pain and separation, was finally allowed to reunite in the warmth of a small room, a space where every painful memory was now wrapped in love and the promise of healing. A father's return. Ben's father, once a symbol of resilience and quiet endurance, stepped beyond the prison gates not as a broken man, but as a warrior who had survived injustice and emerged victorious. Time had weakened his frame, and the past had etched deep scars into his soul, yet in his aged, weary hands, there remained a gentle strength, and in his eyes the unwavering love for his family still shone brightly. A son's anticipation. Outside the courthouse, Ben stood waiting, his heart pounding with a mix of nervousness and overwhelming joy. Years of silent suffering, sleepless nights filled with guilt and longing, had left deep marks on his soul. And yet, as the final door swung open, as his father's familiar figure appeared, Ben rushed forward, throwing himself into his father's embrace. At that moment, all pain, all loss was erased by a happiness beyond words. The power of an embrace. It was a moment so profound that time itself seemed to halt. Father and son, after years of forced separation, found each other again, like scattered pieces of a shattered past, now reassembled into a complete picture of love and family. No words were needed, just a single tight embrace, where years of pain were silently shared and slowly soothed. In his father's embrace, Ben could feel the steady heartbeat, a silent yet powerful reminder that no matter the trials they endured, family love remained unbreakable. A home rebuilt. Back in their small but warm home, Ben's mother, siblings, and extended family had gathered together, completing the heartfelt reunion. Each glance, each smile, each quiet tear carried memories of a painful past, but also the longing for a hopeful future. Seated around the dinner table, they shared stories, reliving both sorrow and resilience, vowing never to let history repeat itself. Laughter and gentle words filled the air, as if all those lost years had been nothing more than a nightmare, now finally left behind. A father's pride. Amidst the warmth, Ben and his father sat side by side, two souls bonded by suffering and perseverance. In his father's gaze, Ben saw not just gratitude, but boundless pride for the son who never gave up, who stood against darkness, who fought for justice despite the dangers and sacrifices. Gently, his father placed a hand on his shoulder, his voice a whisper of immense weight. "You did it. I am proud of you." Such simple words, yet within them lay a lifetime of unspoken emotions, a journey not just of pain, but also of unyielding love and perseverance. Everything was worth it. In that sacred moment, Ben felt everything had been worth it. The sleepless nights, the silent tears, the dangers faced in pursuit of justice, none of it mattered anymore. Now all that remained was peace, hope, and the certainty that perseverance had prevailed. Love, the ultimate healer. Ben realized, no matter how dark the past had been, as long as there was love, wounds could heal, and pain could be transformed into strength. That evening, under the golden glow of the family's warm home, they reflected on the journey that had brought them back together. Old stories were shared. Laughter filled the air. Tears once buried in silence now became a source of strength. A renewed sense of faith, compassion, and hope spread through the room, a silent vow that family was the strongest foundation of all, where pain could be shared and wounds could be healed. Ben's transformation. Sitting among his loved ones, Ben felt a deep shift within himself. He was no longer the broken child who once held on to an unfinished promise. He had become a strong, confident man, one who had not only conquered injustice in the world, but also triumphed over the storms within himself. He understood that no matter what lay ahead, his belief in family and justice would always be his guiding strength. A new beginning. This journey was never just about clearing his father's name. It was the beginning of something new, a fresh chapter written with faith, love, and unity. As laughter and embraces filled the air, the family was reborn. Their story rewritten not with suffering but with forgiveness, resilience, and happiness. And in each of their eyes a promise gleamed: no matter the trials ahead, love and justice would always prevail. Looking towards the future, father and son sat together, gazing toward the horizon, a future where pain was no longer a burden, but a lesson wrapped in love. A future where every scar was proof of survival, and every day was a testament to the power of reunion. This was not just the end of a painful journey, it was the beginning of a new life. One where every moment was a reminder that love endures, that truth prevails, and that no storm, no injustice could ever break the bonds of family. Final reflections. Life is an endless series of challenges, where each of us must face adversities and obstacles we often cannot foresee. Yet, amidst all these difficulties, there is one thing I firmly believe: justice and truth will always find their way. No matter how long and arduous the journey may be. The path that Ben walked, from a child burdened by loss and grief to a resilient man fighting for justice for his father, is a powerful testament to the strength of perseverance and unconditional love. It is a journey filled with emotion, and a lesson in how we can overcome adversity to protect truth and righteousness. The struggle for justice. Justice, in my view, is not something easily attained. It is an abstract ideal that we often must fight for with everything we have to even come close to grasping it. Justice is not always upheld in favorable conditions. Sometimes the very system we trust is what creates injustice. The pursuit of truth, as seen in Ben's journey, is not a simple race but a long, grueling battle, where every step forward demands immense courage and sacrifice. Yet, I believe that despite all pain and loss, if someone is persistent enough and brave enough to confront the truth, they will find a way to rectify the injustices of the past. The power of forgiveness. Forgiveness is an essential element of healing. It is not just about forgiving those who have caused harm, but also about forgiving oneself. When facing past mistakes and failures, it is easy to become trapped in guilt and self-blame. But the truth is, only when we learn to forgive others and ourselves, can we truly heal and move forward. Ben not only had to confront those who wronged his father, but he also had to forgive himself for the guilt he carried, the feeling that he could not save his father sooner. The price of forgiveness can be heavy, but once achieved, the spiritual strength it brings is immeasurable. Justice takes time. Justice is not always immediate. In reality, we often have to wait and fight for years before buried truths are finally revealed. But I firmly believe that every struggle for truth is worth the effort. Life does not always go as planned. There will be times when we feel exhausted, even hopeless. Yet, as long as we do not give up, justice will prevail one day. People like Ben, who endured countless trials and suffering, did not win because they were the strongest, but because they never abandoned their fight for what was right. Justice and truth beyond legal ideals. One of the deepest beliefs I hold is that justice and truth are not just legal or social concepts, but profound spiritual values that guide our lives. Justice may not always be immediate, but with persistence and integrity, it will find its path. Each of us has a responsibility to uphold justice not only for ourselves, but for our communities. This is a duty that cannot be ignored. There will be times when the path to justice is filled with temptations, or when we feel unable to continue. But if we hold on to our belief in the truth, even when surrounded by darkness and corruption, we will eventually find vindication and justice. A battle within ourselves. Looking at Ben's journey, I realized that life is not just a battle against external forces, but also a battle within ourselves. Sometimes the most important question is, do we have the courage to confront injustice, no matter how painful and difficult it may be? Do we have the strength to stand up for the truth, even at a great personal cost? These reflections serve as a driving force, reminding us to keep moving forward, never allowing adversity to break us, and always striving to protect the values we hold dear. Becoming everyday heroes. Ultimately, I believe that each of us has the power to become a hero in our own lives. Justice is not a distant ideal, but something we can practice daily through small yet meaningful actions. Every time we stand up for the truth, every time we confront injustice, we contribute to the creation of a fairer, more humane world. And though the road may be challenging, I believe that, in the end, truth will always triumph. Developing detailed content when crafting a compelling and deeply engaging story, posing open-ended questions to the audience not only stimulates curiosity, but also encourages critical thinking and speculation, making them more invested in the narrative. These questions do not need immediate answers, but should challenge viewers to explore different angles of the story. For example, when Ben commits to keeping his promise to his father, the question, "Can Ben truly fulfill his promise to his father?" is not just an emotional challenge but also sparks a debate about perseverance, the strength of family bonds, and the struggles of an individual against a corrupt legal and social system. Such questions heighten tension and keep the audience glued to the screen. Ben's inner conflict and emotional depth. Throughout his quest for the truth, Ben is not only fighting external forces, but also wrestling with his inner conflicts. His emotions fluctuate from anger and helplessness to hope and determination. These emotions are crucial elements that bring his character to life, making him real and relatable. Ben's psychological turmoil is complex, as he must confront his initial failure to protect his father, the deep emotional scars inflicted by a legal system he once trusted. His relationship with his father is his greatest motivation but also the source of his inner struggle. Can Ben truly overcome all these obstacles? Or will he be crushed by the harsh reality that justice does not always prevail? The psychology of the antagonists. To deepen the complexity of the story, it is essential to analyze the psychological makeup of the antagonists Langston and Hayes. They are not just villains but individuals with motives, thoughts, and emotions. By exploring their motives, we gain insight into deeper systemic issues within the legal and social framework. Langston and Hayes, though Ben's adversaries, are also products of a corrupt system. They believe money and power can manipulate everything. What they fail to realize is that their misdeeds will inevitably be exposed. By analyzing their psychology, the story gains a multidimensional perspective on justice. The audience does not just see Ben as the protagonist, but also understands why the antagonists act the way they do. Personal reflections on justice and truth. When constructing the story, it is crucial to incorporate personal reflections on justice and the struggle for truth. Justice is not an abstract ideal, but something that must be actively pursued. In every story of truth-seeking, one vital element is faith in change. No matter how deeply corrupt the system may be, a determined individual can still make a difference. This is why Ben, despite relentless challenges and dangers, continues his journey. He fights not just for his father, but for a greater cause, justice itself. Justice is not always easy to obtain, but Ben's story proves that if one refuses to give up, if one stands firm in the face of adversity, they can change their own life and the lives of those around them. A lesson in courage and determination. This story teaches us an important lesson about standing up for the truth, no matter the hardships. In life, we often feel powerless when facing forces greater than us. But if we persevere and refuse to give up, we will see that justice always finds its way. Even small actions and the right decisions, though they may seem insignificant at first, can lead to significant change. This is the message of the story: anyone can change their own life, as long as they do not give up in the fight for truth and justice. Thought-provoking questions for the audience. Each part of the story should raise questions that prompt viewers to reflect on life and society. For example, is the legal system truly fair? Is justice just an illusion when controlled by power? These questions not only add tension to the story, but also push the audience to think about broader societal issues. Justice may not always triumph in a world filled with injustice, but this story teaches us that every small act of courage, every person who dares to stand up, can make a difference. Ultimately, truth will always rise if we refuse to abandon our belief in it. A journey beyond justice, a journey of self-discovery. Through open-ended questions, in-depth psychological analysis, and personal reflections, this story becomes more than just a quest for justice. It transforms into a profound journey of self-discovery, where each of us must ask, what values are truly worth fighting for? Thank you so much for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Story Just Told. Your support means the world to us, and we promise to bring you more stories of justice, resilience, and truth. Until next time, stay strong and keep fighting for what's right.